The massive chamber fell silent as the holographic display showed the latest reports from the outer rim. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the faces of the alien delegates around the circular table. Their expressions ranged from worry to outright fear. The Valorian representative, tall and proud with golden skin that gleamed under the chamber lights, leaned forward with his forearms crossed. "The situation grows worse by the day," he said in his deep voice. "3 more systems have gone dark. The Void Seekers are moving faster than our intelligence predicted. The Zenth delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline form, pulsed with nervous light. Our telepathic networks have gone silent in those regions. We fear the worst for our colonies." Admiral Chen remained quiet, studying the tactical displays that floated before them. Earth had been part of the Galactic Council for only 15 years, ever since humanity had finally cracked faster than light travel. They were the newest members, the most primitive by the standards of species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. The ancient Kree Dominion's representative spoke next. The Kree looked like walking trees with bark-like skin and branches instead of arms. This one was old, probably over 800 years by human standards. When he spoke, his voice creaked like wind through old wood. "Honored members," the Kree said, "we have called this emergency session because the threat we face is unlike anything in recent memory. The Void Seekers have returned after 1,000 years of silence. Our ancestors fought them once before and barely survived. We cannot face them divided." The holographic display changed, showing star maps with red zones marking Void Seeker activity. The red was spreading like a disease across the outer spiral arms of the galaxy. "We need every ship, every weapon, every able body," continued the Valorian. "The combined fleets of our species might be enough to stop them, but only if we work together. Every member of the council must contribute." All eyes turned to Admiral Chen. She was a small woman compared to most of the aliens in the room, with graying hair and calm brown eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind her stood her aide, Commander Jackson, and the Earth's diplomatic representative, Ambassador Williams. "Admiral Chen," said the Zenth delegate, its crystalline form flickering with impatience. "Earth has been silent during these discussions. We need to know where humanity stands." Sarah Chen stood slowly, her hands clasped behind her back. She had been expecting this moment since the emergency session began 3 hours ago. Earth had been watching the reports, analyzing the data, and discussing their options. The decision had been made before she even left Earth orbit. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "Humanity has reviewed all available information about this threat. We have studied your historical records and examined the tactical assessments. After careful consideration, Earth must respectfully decline to participate in this military alliance." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usual background hum of the station's system seemed to fade away. The Valorian delegate's golden skin darkened with anger. The Zenth's crystalline form pulsed rapidly, and the ancient Kree's branches rustled with agitation. "Decline." The Valorian's voice boomed through the chamber. "Your world refuses to help defend the galaxy? We refuse to send our people to die in a war that is not ours," Admiral Chen replied calmly. "The Void Seekers have not attacked human space. They have made no threats against Earth or our colonies. We see no reason to involve ourselves in this conflict." The Zenth delegate's form flared bright with outrage. "This is cowardice. Pure cowardice. The Void Seekers threaten all life in this galaxy. How can you sit by and do nothing?" Commander Jackson stepped forward, but Admiral Chen raised her hand slightly, stopping him. She had dealt with angry aliens before, and she knew that losing her temper would only make things worse. "We prefer to call it prudence," she said. "Humanity has learned hard lessons about rushing into wars. We will defend ourselves if attacked, but we will not go looking for fights that do not concern us." The Kree representative's voice grew deeper, more ominous. "You forget, young species, that the galaxy is connected. When the Void Seekers finish with the outer systems, they will turn their attention inward. Eventually they will reach human space. If that happens, we will deal with it then," Admiral Chen replied. "Until then, Earth's position remains unchanged." Ambassador Williams cleared his throat and stepped forward. He was a diplomat by training and nature, always looking for ways to smooth over rough situations. "What Admiral Chen is saying is that Earth prefers to contribute in non-military ways. We can provide medical aid, supply shipments, refugee assistance. We do not need your charity," snapped the Valorian. "We need your ships and your warriors." The Council Charter clearly states that all members must contribute to the common defense. Admiral Chen smiled slightly, but it was not a friendly expression. The Charter says members must contribute to defending Council space. It says nothing about offensive operations outside Council territory. The Void Seekers are attacking from regions beyond our official borders. The legal technicality hung in the air like a challenge. The aliens knew she was right, but that only made them angrier. They had been counting on human support, even though humanity was the newest and supposedly weakest member of the Council. What they did not understand was why Earth was refusing. Humanity's military record was actually quite impressive for such a young spacefaring species. They had quickly established colonies on a dozen worlds, dealt efficiently with pirates and raiders, and their ships, while fewer in number than other species, had proven surprisingly effective in the small conflicts they had been involved in. The Zenth delegate pulsed with frustrated energy. "Your ships may be primitive, but you have numbers. Your population is growing faster than any other Council species. We need those numbers." "Our ships may be primitive," Admiral Chen agreed, "but they are ours, and our people volunteer to serve. They are not conscripted. I will not ask human families to sacrifice their children for a war they did not choose." The Valorian slammed one of his 4 fists on the table, causing the holographic displays to flicker. "This is exactly what we expected from your species. You humans are selfish, short-sighted creatures who think only of yourselves." The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Commander Jackson's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, but Admiral Chen remained perfectly still. When she spoke, her voice was ice cold. "Careful, Valorian. You may find that you need our help more than you think." "We will remember this," the Zenth delegate said, its form dimming with what could only be described as disgust. "When the histories are written, they will show that Earth abandoned the galaxy in its hour of need." Admiral Chen nodded slowly. "I am sure they will write many things. The question is who will be alive to read them." The session continued for another hour, but it was mostly formal procedures and angry accusations. The other Council species made it clear that they considered Earth's refusal to be an act of betrayal. They would proceed with their alliance, but humanity would be excluded from all strategic planning and military coordination. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, the Kree representative approached Admiral Chen. Unlike the others, he seemed more thoughtful than angry. "Admiral," he said in his creaking voice, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Do you truly believe your species can remain neutral in this conflict? The Void Seekers are not like other enemies. They do not negotiate, they do not stop, and they do not show mercy. Eventually they will come for you." Admiral Chen studied the ancient alien's face. Unlike the others, he did not seem to be trying to convince her to change her mind. He appeared genuinely curious about her reasoning. "Perhaps they will," she admitted. "But if that day comes, they will find that humanity has been preparing for it. We may not want this war, but that does not mean we are unprepared for it." The Kree's branches rustled in what might have been amusement. "Your species is very young, Admiral. You have been in space for less than a century, part of the Council for barely 15 years. What could you possibly have prepared that would matter against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations for millennia?" Admiral Chen smiled, and this time there was something almost predatory in the expression. "That, honored delegate, is something I hope you never have to find out." The trip back to Earth took 3 days at maximum hyperspace velocity. Admiral Chen spent most of the time reviewing reports from human intelligence services and military planners. Earth had not been idle during their years in the Council. Human agents had been gathering information about every species, every technology, and every potential threat in the galaxy. The Void Seekers were certainly a threat, but they were not unknown. Human analysts had been studying every scrap of information about them since first contact with the Council. They knew how the Void Seekers fought, what their weaknesses might be, and most importantly, they knew why every previous attempt to stop them had failed. The problem was not that the Void Seekers were unstoppable. The problem was that every species that fought them tried to fight them the wrong way. They used traditional tactics, traditional weapons, and traditional thinking against an enemy that was anything but traditional. When Admiral Chen's ship reached Earth orbit, she was met by a priority message from Fleet Command. The Admiralty wanted a full briefing within 6 hours of her arrival. The President and the Joint Chiefs would all be in attendance. The briefing room in the Pentagon was smaller than the council chamber, but somehow more intimidating. The people gathered around the table represented the military and political leadership of humanity, and they were not happy about the situation. "So they want us to send our fleets to die alongside theirs," said General Morrison, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. "And when we refuse, they call us cowards." "That is an accurate summary," Admiral Chen replied. The Valorians were particularly vocal about their displeasure. President Martinez leaned forward, her fingers steepled in front of her. "Sarah, give me your honest assessment. Are we making the right choice here?" Admiral Chen had been expecting this question. She had been asking herself the same thing during the entire trip home. "Madam President, if we join their alliance, we will be sending human ships and human lives to fight in a war that we cannot win using their methods. The historical records are clear. Every species that has fought the Void Seekers using conventional tactics has been defeated. And if we do not join them, then they will likely be defeated as well, but without taking us down with them. If and when the Void Seekers reach human space, we will be ready for them." Admiral Johnson, head of fleet operations, spoke up. "What makes you so confident that we can succeed where others have failed?" Admiral Chen activated a holographic display that showed the current disposition of Earth's military forces. What appeared on the screen surprised some of the people in the room, even though they had security clearance to know about it. "Because we have been preparing for this war since the day we learned about the Void Seekers," she said. "While the other council species have been building traditional fleets designed to fight other species like themselves, we have been building something else entirely." The display showed ship designs that looked nothing like the sleek vessels preferred by most galactic civilizations. Human ships were bulky, angular, and covered in armor that seemed excessive by galactic standards. But the specifications told a different story. "Every human ship in service has been designed with the Void Seekers in mind," Admiral Chen continued. "Our weapons, our defenses, our tactics, everything has been built around the assumption that someday we would have to face them alone." President Martinez studied the display with interest. "How long have we been planning for this?" "Since our second year in the Council, Madam President. Our intelligence services identified the Void Seekers as the primary long-term threat to human survival. Everything we have done since then has been preparation for this moment." The room was quiet for several minutes as the leadership absorbed this information. Finally, the President spoke again. "What do you need from us, Admiral?" "Time, Madam President. Time for our preparations to be completed. And time for the other Council species to weaken the enemy before they reach us. Their sacrifice will not be in vain, even if they do not realize it." General Morrison leaned back in his chair. "This is a hell of a gamble, Sarah. If you are wrong about our ability to fight the Void Seekers, humanity could be wiped out." "If I am wrong," Admiral Chen replied, "then we were doomed anyway. At least this way we face extinction on our own terms, not as junior partners in someone else's doomed alliance." The meeting continued for several more hours, but the decision had already been made. Earth would maintain its position of neutrality, at least for now. The human fleets would continue their preparations, and the galaxy would have to face the Void Seekers without them. As Admiral Chen left the Pentagon that evening, she looked up at the stars and wondered how many of those lights would still be shining a year from now. The war had begun and humanity had chosen its path. Now all they could do was wait and prepare for what was coming. In the distance, she could see the orbital shipyards where the newest human warships were taking shape. They were magnificent and terrible machines designed for a single purpose. When the time came, the galaxy would learn what humanity was truly capable of. But not yet. For now, Earth would watch and wait while others fought and died. It was not a choice that would make them popular, but Admiral Chen believed it was the right one. Time would tell if she was correct. The war had been raging for 6 months, and the news from the front lines grew worse with each passing day. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of Luna Station, Earth's primary military coordination facility, watching the tactical displays that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas under Void Seeker control, and they were spreading like a cancer across the star maps. 3 entire sectors had gone dark, their populations either dead or scattered as refugees fleeing toward the galactic core. "Latest casualty reports, Admiral," Commander Jackson said, handing her a data tablet. The numbers were staggering. The combined Council fleets had lost over 40% of their ships, and the Void Seekers seemed to be growing stronger with each victory. "How are they doing it?" asked Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Earth's leading xenobiologist and the only human who had been allowed to examine captured Void Seeker technology. "Their ships should not be this adaptable." Admiral Chen studied the tactical analysis on her screen. "They learn from every engagement. Every weapon we use against them, every tactic we employ, they adapt and counter. It is like fighting an enemy that gets smarter every time you hit them." The door to the command center opened, and Ambassador Williams entered with a grim expression. He had been spending most of his time dealing with refugee coordination and what little diplomacy was still possible with the other Council species. "Admiral, we have received another formal request from the Valorian Empire," he said. "They are asking us to reconsider our position. They are offering significant concessions, including shared command authority and access to their most advanced technologies." "What is the military situation in Valorian space?" Admiral Chen asked. Commander Jackson brought up the relevant displays. "Not good. They have lost their primary fleet base at Goldenheart, and their main battle fleet is down to 60% strength. Intelligence suggests they are falling back to their core worlds." Admiral Chen nodded grimly. The Valorians had always been the most militaristic of the Council species, proud of their warrior culture and advanced weapons technology. If they were struggling this badly, the other species were probably in even worse shape. "What about the Zenth Collective?" "Their telepathic networks are in chaos," Dr. Harper replied. "The Void Seekers seem to have found a way to disrupt their mental connections. Without their coordinated hive mind tactics, the Zenth fleets are fighting as individuals, and they are not trained for that." The situation was developing exactly as Earth's military planners had predicted. The Council species were fighting the Void Seekers using traditional fleet tactics, treating them like any other enemy. They were learning the hard way that the Void Seekers were not like other enemies. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "we are receiving a priority transmission from Captain Rodriguez aboard the medical ship Mercy. She is requesting permission to enter the Kepler 442 system to assist with refugee evacuation." Admiral Chen walked over to the communication station. Captain Maria Rodriguez was one of Earth's most experienced medical officers, and the Mercy was the flagship of humanity's small but elite humanitarian fleet. "Put her through," Admiral Chen ordered. Captain Rodriguez appeared on the main screen, her tired face showing the strain of the past months. Behind her, the bridge of the Mercy bustled with activity as medical personnel prepared for another rescue mission. "Admiral, we have reports of approximately 50,000 civilians trapped on Kepler 442b. The planetary defense grid has failed, and Council evacuation ships cannot reach them due to Void Seeker patrol activity in the system." "What is the tactical situation?" Admiral Chen asked. "Long-range scans show a small Void Seeker presence, maybe a dozen ships. They appear to be hunting down fleeing transports rather than occupying the planet. If we move fast, we can get the civilians out before the main enemy fleet arrives." Admiral Chen considered the request. Officially, Earth was neutral in this conflict, but they had been providing humanitarian aid since the war began. Human medical ships had saved hundreds of thousands of refugees, and Earth's colonies had become temporary homes for displaced populations from a dozen different species. "Captain, are there any human civilians in that system?" "Negative, Admiral. The population is primarily Zenth colonists with some Valorian traders and their families." The distinction was important. Earth's official policy was to protect human civilians first, but they had been quietly extending that protection to anyone who needed help. It was a risk, but it was also the right thing to do. "Permission granted, Captain. Take escort vessels Hammer and Shield with you. If you encounter significant resistance, withdraw immediately." "Understood, Admiral." "Mercy out." The transmission ended and Admiral Chen returned to studying the strategic displays. The Mercy's mission was small in the grand scheme of the war, but it represented something important. While the Council species saw Earth's neutrality as cowardice, humanity continued to save lives wherever possible. "Admiral," Ambassador Williams said quietly, "I should inform you that the other Council species are becoming increasingly bitter about our position. There are rumors that some of them are considering declaring us enemies of the galactic community." "Let them," Admiral Chen replied. "Actions speak louder than words, and our actions have saved more lives than their military alliance." Dr. Harper looked up from her analysis workstation. Sarah, I have been studying the Void Seeker ship designs and tactics. There is something very disturbing about their adaptation patterns. What do you mean? They are not just learning from combat experience. They are incorporating elements from the ships they destroy. Their biomechanical technology allows them to literally absorb and integrate foreign systems into their own vessels. Admiral Chen felt a cold chill run down her spine. Are you saying they are becoming stronger by destroying Council ships? Exactly. Every Valorian weapon system they encounter, every Zenth navigation computer they capture, every Kree defensive shield they analyze, all of it becomes part of their collective capability. The longer this war goes on, the more dangerous they become. Commander Jackson whistled softly. No wonder the Council fleets are losing so badly. They are essentially training their enemy how to fight them. The implications were staggering. The current strategy of wearing down the Void Seekers through attrition was not just failing. It was actively making the situation worse. Every battle the Council fleets fought was making their enemy stronger and more capable. How long before they complete their conquest of Council space? Admiral Chen asked. Dr. Harper consulted her projections. At the current rate of advance, they will reach the core worlds within 8 months. After that, they will start moving toward human space. 8 months. That was less time than Earth's military planners had hoped for, but it would have to be enough. The final preparations for humanity's secret weapons program were already underway, and the new ship designs were moving from prototype to production. The next few hours brought a steady stream of bad news from the front lines. The ancient Kree homeworld had fallen, its population of billions either dead or scattered. The Valorian Second Fleet had been ambushed and destroyed while trying to reinforce their border colonies. The Zenth telepathic relay stations were going offline one by one, cutting their species off from their hive mind coordination. But there was other news as well. Captain Rodriguez reported a successful evacuation from Kepler 442b, with all 50,000 civilians safely aboard refugee transports heading for human space. Similar rescue missions were taking place across the border regions, as Earth's medical and transport ships worked tirelessly to save anyone they could reach. The refugee camps on human worlds were growing larger every day. New Austin Colony had become home to over 1 million displaced Valorians. The research station at Proxima Centauri housed 20,000 Zenth refugees who were slowly learning to function as individuals rather than as part of their collective consciousness. Even some of the ancient Kree had found sanctuary on human worlds, their tree-like forms taking root in Earth's carefully maintained nature preserves. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres called out, we are receiving a transmission from the Valorian High Command. They are requesting an emergency conference with Earth leadership. Admiral Chen sighed. She had been expecting this. As the military situation deteriorated, the pressure on Earth to join the war would only increase. The other species were desperate, and desperate people often made poor decisions. Tell them I will meet with their representatives at the neutral station at Wolf 359. Standard diplomatic protocols. The meeting took place 2 days later in a sterile conference room that had been designed to accommodate multiple species. The Valorian delegation was led by High Admiral Korath, a massive warrior whose golden skin bore the scars of dozens of battles. With him came representatives from what remained of the other Council species. Admiral Chen, High Admiral Korath began without preamble. We must speak plainly. The war is going badly. We need Earth's help, and we need it now. My position has not changed, Admiral Chen replied calmly. Earth will continue to provide humanitarian aid, but we will not commit our military forces to this conflict. Your humanitarian aid, spat the Zenth representative, its crystalline form pulsing with angry light, means nothing if there is no one left to save. The Void Seekers are not just conquering our worlds, they are exterminating entire populations. Which is exactly why our medical ships and refugee camps are so important, Admiral Chen countered. We have saved millions of lives that would otherwise have been lost. High Admiral Korath leaned forward, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of desperation. Admiral, you must understand. This is not about pride or politics anymore. This is about survival. If the Council falls, the Void Seekers will turn their attention to human space. You cannot defend yourselves alone. That remains to be seen, Admiral Chen said quietly. The Kree representative, one of the few survivors from their species leadership, spoke in his creaking voice. Admiral Chen, I remember our conversation from the first council meeting about this war. You said that if the Void Seekers came for humanity, they would find you prepared. What did you mean by that? Admiral Chen studied the faces around the table. These beings represented the last free governments of their species. In a few months, they would likely all be dead or in hiding. She felt genuine sympathy for their situation, but she also knew that Earth's plan required them to remain neutral for as long as possible. I meant that humanity does not make military commitments lightly, she said carefully. When we fight to win. Then fight with us. High Admiral Korath slammed one of his fists on the table. Your ships may be few in number, but they are well designed. Your people are experienced fighters. Together we might be able to turn the tide. Or we might all die together, Admiral Chen replied. The historical record is clear, High Admiral. Every species that has fought the Void Seekers using conventional fleet tactics has been defeated. What makes you think this time will be different? The question hung in the air like an accusation. The alien delegates looked at each other uncomfortably because they all knew she was right. They were fighting the same war their ancestors had fought 1,000 years ago, using the same tactics and getting the same results. Because this time we have more ships, better coordination, improved technology, the Zenth representative said, but its tone lacked conviction. And the Void Seekers have had 1,000 years to prepare, Admiral Chen pointed out. They are not the same enemy your ancestors faced. They have evolved, adapted, grown stronger, but your tactics remain essentially unchanged. High Admiral Korath's golden skin darkened with anger. Then what would you have us do? Surrender? Allow them to exterminate every free species in the galaxy? I would have you survive, Admiral Chen said softly. Evacuate your core populations. Scatter your fleets. Make the Void Seekers pay for every world they take. But do not throw away lives in hopeless battles. Run and hide like cowards, the Zenth representative pulsed with disgust. Live to fight another day, Admiral Chen corrected. There are worse things than tactical withdrawal. The meeting continued for several more hours, but it achieved nothing. The council species were too proud to admit that their strategy was failing, and too desperate to consider alternatives. They would continue to fight until they were all dead or defeated, and then the Void Seekers would turn toward human space. As Admiral Chen prepared to leave the station, High Admiral Korath approached her privately. The massive Valorian warrior looked older than she remembered, worn down by months of losing battles and watching his people die. Admiral, he said quietly, may I ask you something? Of course. When the Void Seekers finish with us and come for your people, will you remember this conversation? Admiral Chen looked into the alien's four eyes and saw genuine pain there. This was a being who had spent his entire life protecting his people, and he was watching them die despite his best efforts. High Admiral, I will remember many things about this war. I will remember the courage of your people in the face of impossible odds. I will remember the sacrifices made by beings who fought for something greater than themselves, and I will remember that when the time came to choose between survival and honor, different species made different choices. And which choice will history judge as correct? That depends on who survives to write the history, Admiral Chen replied. The trip back to Earth gave Admiral Chen time to think about the meeting and its implications. The council species had perhaps 6 months left before their final defeat. After that, humanity would face the Void Seekers alone, with only their preparations and their secret weapons to protect them. She activated her personal communication system and sent a priority message to Earth's military leadership. The time for preparation was almost over. Soon it would be time for action. When her ship reached Luna Station, Admiral Chen was met with both good news and bad news. The good news was that the final phase of humanity's secret military program was ahead of schedule. The new weapon systems were ready for deployment, and the specially designed ships were rolling off the production lines faster than projected. The bad news was that the Void Seekers had accelerated their advance. The Valorian core worlds were under direct attack, and the last Zenth collective nodes were being systematically destroyed. The ancient Kree civilization was now nothing more than scattered refugees hiding in the outer systems. Admiral Chen stood in her office, looking out at the stars through the reinforced viewport. Somewhere out there, entire civilizations were dying, while humanity watched from the sidelines. It was not an easy burden to bear, but it was necessary. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one who refused to fight until the fight came to them. When that moment arrived, the Void Seekers would discover that humanity had not been hiding out of fear. They had been preparing. Captain Maria Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the hospital ship Mercy, watching the tactical display as they approached the Kepler 186 system. The readings showed massive destruction ahead, another world falling to the Void Seekers' relentless advance. But there were still life signs on the planet's surface, and where there was life, there was hope for rescue. "Captain, we are receiving multiple distress signals from the surface," reported Lieutenant Kim at the communication station. Approximately 20,000 survivors scattered across 3 cities. Mixed populations, including families with children. Maria nodded grimly. The war had been raging for 8 months now, and the pattern was always the same. The Void Seekers would arrive in overwhelming force, destroy the planetary defenses, and then systematically hunt down any survivors. Those who escaped the initial assault had perhaps days or hours before the killing machines found them. "What about escort vessels?" she asked Commander Torres, her second-in-command. "The destroyers Lightning and Thunder are maintaining perimeter patrol. No sign of enemy activity in the outer system, but long-range sensors are picking up something massive moving in from the direction of the galactic rim." Maria studied the sensor readings. Whatever was coming was big, probably the main Void Seeker fleet arriving to finish what their advanced scouts had started. They would have a narrow window to evacuate as many civilians as possible before the system became a death trap. "Signal the escort destroyers. Tell them to maintain their patrol but be ready to cover our withdrawal if needed." "How long until the transport ships arrive?" "The civilian evacuation fleet is 6 hours out," Torres replied. "Captain Chen's convoy from New Beijing Colony, plus 3 Valorian refugee ships that volunteered to help. 6 hours. Maria had been running rescue missions long enough to know that 6 hours could feel like 6 years when you were racing against death. But they had to try. Every life saved was a victory against an enemy that seemed determined to exterminate all organic life in the galaxy. "Take us into orbit, Helm. Launch all medical shuttles as soon as we reach the survivors' positions. I want everyone off that planet before the main enemy fleet arrives." The Mercy was not a warship, but she was something just as important in this war. She was hope made manifest, a symbol that not everyone had given up on saving lives. The ship's medical bays could handle thousands of casualties. Her shuttles could evacuate entire cities, and her crew had saved more lives than many military vessels had taken. As they entered orbit around Kepler 186b, the scope of the destruction became clear. The planet's major cities were burning, their defense platforms reduced to twisted metal drifting in space. But the sensors also showed clusters of life signs in various locations, groups of survivors who had managed to escape the initial assault. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the surface. It is coming from what looks like a school that was converted into an emergency shelter." "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of a young Zenth individual whose crystalline form was cracked and dimmed with exhaustion. Behind her, Maria could see dozens of children from various species huddled together in what had once been a classroom. "Please," the Zenth said in accented standard, "we have children here. 347 children from 12 different species. Our teachers are trying to keep them calm, but they are scared and hungry, and they keep asking when their parents are coming back." Maria felt her heart clench. This was always the hardest part of these missions. So many of the parents would never be coming back, and these children would grow up as orphans in refugee camps on distant worlds. "We are coming to get you," Maria said firmly. "All of you. Keep the children together and be ready to move when our shuttles arrive. You are going to be safe, I promise." The evacuation proceeded with practiced efficiency. The Mercy's shuttles flew constant runs between the ship and the surface, bringing up load after load of survivors, Valorians, Zenth, even a few ancient Kree who had been visiting the world when the attack began. They were all frightened, traumatized, but alive. As the hours passed, the long-range sensors showed the approaching Void Seeker fleet growing larger and more distinct. Whatever was coming was massive, probably the largest enemy formation the human crews had encountered. "Captain," Commander Torres said quietly, "maybe we should consider leaving. We have evacuated over 18,000 people already. The remaining survivors are scattered across a wide area, and that enemy fleet is getting close." Maria looked at the tactical display. Torres was right from a purely military standpoint. They had saved most of the people they could reach, and staying much longer would put the ship and everyone on it at risk. But there were still life signs on the surface, still people waiting for rescue. How long until Captain Chen's convoy arrives? 2 hours, assuming they maintain current speed. And how long until the enemy fleet reaches us? At their current approach vector, approximately 90 minutes. Maria made her decision. We keep working. Every life matters, Commander. Signal Captain Chen and tell her to increase speed. We will hold position as long as possible. The next hour was a frantic race against time. More shuttles launched. More survivors were brought aboard, and still the enemy fleet drew closer. The escorts Lightning and Thunder had moved to defensive positions around the Mercy, their weapons powered up and ready for battle. Captain Chen's convoy is entering the system, Lieutenant Kim reported. She has the transport New Horizon, 2 Valorian civilian vessels, and... Wait, there are more ships coming with her. The tactical display updated to show the new arrivals. In addition to the expected evacuation ships, there were 3 more vessels flying human transponder codes. They were smaller than the Mercy, but their configuration suggested they were also medical ships. This is Captain Chen aboard the New Horizon, came a familiar voice over the communications system. Maria, what is your status? We have evacuated over 22,000 civilians, but there are still survivors on the surface. That Void Seeker fleet is going to be here soon, and it looks big. Understood. My ships will take up evacuation duties. Get your people back aboard the Mercy and prepare for immediate departure. Maria was about to acknowledge the order when Lieutenant Kim called out urgently. Captain. Enemy contact! Multiple Void Seeker vessels dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The main screen switched to long-range sensors, showing the nightmare that was approaching them. Dozens of biomechanical ships, their hulls covered with the integrated technology of a dozen conquered species. They were moving fast, too fast for a normal evacuation to be completed. How long until they reach us? Maria asked. 20 minutes at their current speed, the tactical officer replied. Maria looked around her bridge crew. These were good people, volunteers who had signed up to save lives rather than take them. They deserved better than to die in a system that most humans had never heard of, trying to rescue aliens who would probably be forgotten by history. All shuttles, return to ship immediately, she ordered. We are leaving now. Captain, Lieutenant Kim interrupted. I am receiving another transmission from the surface. It is the same school shelter we evacuated earlier. I thought we got everyone from there. We did, but they are transmitting from a different location. They say there are more children, ones who were moved to a secondary shelter when the first one became overcrowded. Maria closed her eyes for a moment. More children. Always more children. It was as if the universe was testing her, seeing how much she was willing to sacrifice for people she had never met. How many? They say approximately 200, ages ranging from infants to adolescents. Multiple species, including some human exchange students who were visiting the planet when the attack began. Human children. That changed the calculation entirely. Earth's official policy was clear. Human civilians took priority in any evacuation scenario. But there were alien children there too, and they were just as innocent, just as deserving of rescue. Captain, Commander Torres said urgently, those enemy ships will be in weapons range in 15 minutes. If we stay to launch another shuttle mission, we might not make it out at all. Maria stared at the tactical display, watching the red icons that represented death approaching her position. The smart move, the safe move, was to leave now with the people they had already saved. No one would blame her for retreating in the face of overwhelming enemy force, but she could not stop thinking about those children hiding in a school basement, waiting for someone to come save them. Launch Shuttle Bay 2, she ordered. Maximum speed to the surface, grab everyone at that shelter and get back here. All other shuttles remain docked. We leave the moment Bay 2 returns. Captain, that is cutting it very close, Torres warned. Sometimes close is all we have, Commander. The next 10 minutes were the longest of Maria's career. She watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet drew closer, their biomechanical ships moving with the terrible efficiency that had conquered half the galaxy. At the same time, she tracked the progress of her lone shuttle as it raced toward the surface to collect the last group of survivors. Shuttle Bay 2 has reached the shelter, Lieutenant Kim reported. They are loading passengers now. Enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 4 minutes, the tactical officer called out. Captain, came Captain Chen's voice over the communication system. You need to leave now. That is not a raiding force approaching us. It is a full battle fleet. My sensors count over 60 ships, including some massive command vessels. Maria gritted her teeth. 2 more minutes. My shuttle is almost loaded. Maria, those ships will be able to target you in 90 seconds. You need to go. Shuttle Bay 2 is launching, Lieutenant Kim announced. They have 237 passengers aboard, including 15 human children. Relief flooded through Maria as she watched the shuttle racing back toward the Mercy. They were going to make it. They were going to save everyone and escape before the enemy fleet could engage them. That was when everything went wrong. Captain, the tactical officer shouted. Enemy ships are accelerating. They are moving much faster than projected. The display updated to show the Void Seeker fleet's new trajectory. Instead of the steady approach they had been maintaining, the enemy ships had suddenly increased speed and were now bearing down on the evacuation convoy like predators sensing wounded prey. Time to weapons range? Maria asked. 30 seconds. They must have detected our shuttle launch and decided to engage immediately. Maria felt ice form in her stomach. The shuttle was still 60 seconds out from the Mercy, and the enemy would be in firing range in half that time. There was no way to escape clean. All ships emergency acceleration, she ordered. We are leaving now. Captain, Shuttle Bay 2 will not reach us in time, Commander Torres pointed out. Then we will have to cover them. Signal lightning and thunder. Tell them to interpose between us and the enemy fleet. Buy us every second they can. The 2 human destroyers immediately changed course, their smaller but heavily armed forms moving to block the enemy's approach. They were outnumbered 30-1, but they were going to try anyway. Captain, Lieutenant Kim called out. Shuttle Bay 2 is requesting permission to dock. Granted. The moment they are aboard, we jump to hyperspace. The shuttle slammed into the docking bay with enough force to activate the emergency restraints. But the bay doors sealed, and the pilot immediately signaled all clear. Maria was about to order the jump to hyperspace when the tactical display lit up with weapons fire. The Void Seeker fleet had opened fire, not on the human warships that were challenging them, but on the helpless evacuation convoy. Brilliant beams of energy reached across space, targeting the medical ships and transports that were loaded with civilians. Evasive maneuvers, Maria shouted, but it was too late. The first salvo struck the Valorian transport Golden Wings, a converted passenger liner that had been carrying over 3,000 refugees. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking everyone aboard with it. The second salvo targeted Captain Chen's ship, the New Horizon. The transport's shields held for a moment, then collapsed under the concentrated fire. The ship broke apart, its hull cracking open like an eggshell to spill its human and alien passengers into the vacuum of space. The third salvo was aimed at the Mercy Maria, watched death approaching in the form of coherent energy beams that could vaporize a city block. She had perhaps 2 seconds to live, 2 seconds to think about all the people she had saved and all the ones she had failed to save. But the beams never reached her ship. The destroyer Lightning threw itself into the path of the enemy fire, taking the full force of the salvo meant for the medical ship. The smaller vessel was destroyed instantly, but its sacrifice bought the Mercy the time it needed. Jump now, Maria screamed. Space twisted around them as the hyperspace engines engaged, pulling the Mercy away from the battle and toward the safety of human space. But as they fled, Maria could see on the tactical display what was happening to the ships they left behind. The Thunder was fighting alone now, its weapons blazing defiance at the enemy fleet. But it was one ship against dozens, and the outcome was inevitable. The destroyer lasted another 30 seconds before enemy fire overwhelmed its defenses and tore it apart. The remaining evacuation ships tried to scatter, but the Void Seekers hunted them down methodically. The converted freighter Safe Harbor, loaded with Zenth refugees, was cornered and destroyed near the system's asteroid belt. The medical ship Healing Touch, crewed by Valorian volunteers, made it almost to the hyperspace jump point before enemy fire caught up with it. In less than 5 minutes, 12 ships and over 15,000 innocent civilians were dead. The only survivor of the evacuation convoy was the Mercy, and only because 2 human destroyers had sacrificed themselves to save her. As the hyperspace tunnel collapsed behind them and normal space returned, Maria slumped in her command chair. They had saved over 22,000 people from Kepler 186b, but the cost had been terrible. Good people were dead, brave crews who had volunteered to risk their lives saving others. Captain, Lieutenant Kim said softly. "We are receiving priority messages from Earth Fleet Command. They want a full report on what happened." Maria nodded numbly. She would have to tell Admiral Chen and the other Earth leaders about the disaster, about how the Void Seekers had deliberately targeted civilians and medical ships. She would have to explain how an enemy that was supposedly focused on military conquest had chosen to murder refugees and children. But first, she had to check on the survivors they had rescued. Somewhere in the Mercy's medical bays were over 22,000 beings who owed their lives to the crew members who had just died protecting them. Among them were 15 human children who would grow up knowing that their teachers and friends had paid the ultimate price for their freedom. As Maria made her way toward the medical section, she wondered what Admiral Chen would make of this news. The Void Seekers had crossed a line today, attacking medical ships and murdering refugees in full view of human witnesses. Earth had been neutral in this war for 8 months, watching from the sidelines while others fought and died. But neutrality had rules, and one of those rules was that you did not deliberately target children. The Void Seekers had just broken that rule, and Maria suspected they were about to learn what happened when you made that kind of mistake, while humans were watching. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the emergency briefing room aboard Luna Station, watching the recorded footage from the Mercy's tactical sensors for the 3rd time. The images were crystal clear, showing Void Seeker ships deliberately targeting medical vessels and refugee transports. There could be no doubt about what had happened in the Kepler 186 system. Around the table sat the most senior military and political leaders of humanity. President Martinez looked older than her 58 years, her face drawn with the weight of the decision they all knew was coming. General Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, sat with his hands folded, staring at the tactical display with barely controlled rage. "How many total casualties?" President Martinez asked quietly. 15,347 confirmed dead, Admiral Chen replied, including over 2,000 children. The Void Seekers made no attempt to capture prisoners or salvage the ships. They were simply executing civilians. Admiral Johnson leaned forward, his weathered face grim. "Sarah, in your professional opinion, was this a tactical decision or a deliberate message?" Admiral Chen had been asking herself the same question since Captain Rodriguez's report arrived 6 hours ago. The answer chilled her to the bone. "It was a message, sir. The Void Seekers have been fighting this war for 8 months, and they know we have been providing humanitarian aid while remaining militarily neutral. This attack was designed to send us a clear signal that our neutrality will not protect our people." "They targeted children," General Morrison said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alien children, human children, it did not matter to them. They just opened fire on medical ships and refugee transports." Defense Secretary Williams, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "This changes everything. We can no longer claim that this war does not concern us. They have made it clear that humanity is a target, whether we fight or not." President Martinez stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the orbital shipyards where Earth's secret weapons had been under construction for the past year. "Admiral Chen, what is the current status of our military preparations?" "Project Retribution is 96% complete, Madam President. The new ship designs are ready for deployment, and our special weapon systems have passed all testing protocols. We can begin combat operations within 72 hours. And our assessment of enemy strength?" Admiral Chen activated the holographic display, showing the current tactical situation across the galaxy. The red zones had expanded significantly since the war began, covering nearly 40% of Council space. The Void Seekers have approximately 800 ships of various classes, organized into 12 major battle fleets. Their largest concentration is the command fleet that destroyed the evacuation convoy, estimated at over 60 vessels, including several super-heavy command ships. "What about the Council species? Do any of them still have meaningful military capability?" "The Valorian Empire has perhaps 50 ships remaining, scattered across their core worlds. The Zenth Collective is down to maybe 30 vessels, and their hive mind coordination is completely disrupted. The Kree have no organized military presence left, just small groups of survivors hiding in the outer systems." President Martinez turned back to face the table. "So if we enter this war, we will essentially be fighting alone." "Yes, Madam President, but we have advantages that the Council species lacked." Admiral Chen changed the display to show Earth's current military assets. What appeared on the screen surprised some of the people in the room. even though they had security clearances that should have given them access to this information. For the past 10 months, while publicly maintaining a force of 47 ships, Earth has actually been operating a secret construction program. Our true fleet strength is currently 112 vessels, including 12 ships of a completely new class. The display showed ship designs that looked nothing like the vessels used by other galactic civilizations. These were not the sleek, elegant ships favored by most spacefaring species. They were blocky, angular, and covered with weapon systems that seemed excessive even by military standards. What exactly are we looking at? President Martinez asked. Madam President, meet the Retribution-class dreadnought, Admiral Chen said with something approaching pride in her voice. Each ship is 3 kilometers long, carries a crew of 8,000, and mounts weapon systems that do not officially exist in any galactic database. General Morrison studied the specifications with interest. What kind of weapons are we talking about? Quantum destabilization cannons capable of destroying matter at the subatomic level, gravitational manipulation devices that can create artificial black holes, nanomachine swarms designed to disassemble enemy ships from the inside out, and those are just the conventional weapons. Defense Secretary Williams looked up from his data tablet. What do you mean by conventional? Admiral Chen's expression grew darker. We have also developed weapons specifically designed to counter the Void Seekers' biomechanical technology. Viral programs that can infect their integrated systems, electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt their neural networks, and chemical agents that can dissolve their organic components. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth had not been building a fleet to fight other civilized species. They had been building a fleet specifically designed to exterminate the Void Seekers. How many people know about this program? President Martinez asked. Fewer than 500 individuals have complete knowledge of Project Retribution, Admiral Chen replied. Another 2,000 are aware of parts of the program but do not know the full scope. And the crews for these ships? All volunteers, Madam President. Every person serving aboard a Retribution-class vessel knows exactly what they have signed up for. They know that when we deploy these weapons, there will be no prisoners, no mercy, and no survivors. Admiral Johnson leaned back in his chair, absorbing the magnitude of what they were discussing. Sarah, you are talking about genocide. The complete extermination of an entire species. Yes, sir, I am. The Void Seekers have made it clear that they intend to exterminate all organic life in this galaxy. They have had 1,000 years to change their ways, and they have chosen instead to become more efficient killers. Today they murdered children in full view of our medical personnel. This is not a war between civilizations, it is a war between life and death. President Martinez returned to her seat at the head of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with a decision that will define humanity's place in this galaxy for generations to come. Do we maintain our neutrality and hope that the Void Seekers will be satisfied with conquering Council space, or do we commit our people and our resources to a war that will likely end with the complete destruction of one side or the other? Madam President, General Morrison said firmly, they fired on medical ships carrying children, human children. Our neutrality ended the moment they pulled those triggers. Defense Secretary Williams nodded agreement. The political implications are clear. If we do nothing, we will be seen as abandoning not only our humanitarian principles but our own people. If we act, we send a message to the galaxy that there are lines that cannot be crossed. And the military implications? President Martinez asked. Admiral Chen stood and activated a new set of displays showing projected battle scenarios. Our analysis suggests that we can defeat the Void Seekers, but only if we commit completely to the effort. Half measures will fail, just as they have failed for every other species that has fought them. This must be total war. What are you recommending, Admiral? I recommend that we authorize immediate deployment of the Retribution fleet with orders to engage and destroy all Void Seeker forces. No negotiations, no prisoners, no mercy. We end this threat permanently. The debate continued for another 2 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The footage from the Kepler-186 system had made the decision for them. You could not murder children in front of humans and expect them to remain neutral. Finally, President Martinez called for a formal vote. The decision was unanimous. Earth would enter the war against the Void Seekers with the full force of its secret military capabilities. Admiral Chen, President Martinez said formally, you are hereby authorized to deploy all available military assets against Void Seeker forces. Your mission is simple. Eliminate this threat to galactic civilization. Use whatever means are necessary. Understood, Madam President. What are your orders regarding coordination with surviving Council forces? Inform them that Earth is entering the war, but make it clear that we will be conducting our own operations. They can assist us if they choose, but we will not be constrained by their tactical limitations or political concerns. As the meeting broke up and the various officials departed to begin implementing the decision, Admiral Chen remained behind to study the tactical displays. In 72 hours, the Retribution fleet would begin its first combat operations. The Void Seekers thought they had sent humanity a message by attacking medical ships and murdering children. They were about to learn that humans had a message of their own to deliver. 2 days later, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, flagship of humanity's secret fleet. Around her, the ship's bridge crew made final preparations for combat operations. These were all volunteers, men and women who had trained for months to operate weapons that pushed the boundaries of galactic law and civilized warfare. "Admiral," reported Captain Stevens, the ship's commanding officer. "All systems are green across the fleet. 12 dreadnoughts, 36 heavy cruisers, and 48 destroyer escorts ready for hyperspace jump." Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display showing their target, the massive Void Seeker command fleet that had destroyed the evacuation convoy. Intelligence suggested it contained over 60 enemy vessels, including several of their largest command ships. "Signal the fleet," Admiral Chen ordered. "Begin Operation Retribution. Target coordinates are confirmed. We jump in 30 seconds. As the countdown proceeded, Admiral Chen thought about Captain Rodriguez and the brave crews who had died trying to save children they had never met. She thought about the 15,000 civilians who had been murdered, simply because they were in the wrong place when humanity's enemies decided to send a message. 10 seconds to jump, Captain Stevens announced. Admiral Chen keyed the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Remember why we are here. Remember what they did to innocent children and medical personnel. Show them what happens when humans decide that enough is enough. Jump." Space twisted around the human fleet as 12 hyperspace rifts opened simultaneously. In the space of a heartbeat, humanity's most powerful warships disappeared from Earth orbit and reappeared in the Kepler 186 system, where their enemies were celebrating their latest victory. The Void Seekers had made a terrible mistake. They thought they understood humanity's nature, based on 8 months of neutrality and humanitarian aid. They thought humans were soft, reluctant to fight, more concerned with saving lives than taking them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display as it updated to show enemy positions. The Void Seeker fleet was exactly where intelligence had predicted. Their biomechanical ships arranged in a defensive formation around the system's primary star. "Captain Stevens," she said calmly, "you may fire when ready." The first salvo from the Retribution fleet lit up space like a dozen newborn suns. Quantum destabilization cannons fired coherent beams of pure destruction, while gravitational manipulators created spatial distortions that tore enemy ships apart at the atomic level. Nanomachine swarms spread out like clouds of metallic death, seeking enemy hulls to dissolve and consume. The Void Seekers had fought dozens of species over the millennia, adapted to thousands of different weapons and tactics, but they had never faced anything like this. Human technology, developed in secret and designed specifically to counter their advantages, struck them like the wrath of an angry god. Within minutes, a third of the enemy fleet was simply gone, not just destroyed but completely eliminated at the molecular level. The survivors tried to adapt, to integrate the new threats into their biomechanical systems, but there was nothing left to study. Human weapons did not leave wreckage behind. "Admiral," Captain Stevens reported with something approaching awe in his voice, "enemy fleet is breaking formation. They appear to be attempting to retreat." Admiral Chen's expression was stone cold. "Signal all ships, no survivors. I want every single enemy vessel destroyed before they can report back to their commanders." The hunt that followed was less a battle than an extermination. Human ships pursued the fleeing Void Seekers through the asteroid belts and gas clouds of the outer system, methodically destroying every enemy vessel they could find. Advanced sensor systems tracked down ships trying to hide, while predictive algorithms calculated escape routes and placed human vessels in position to intercept them. When it was over, the Kepler 186 system was silent except for the hum of human engines. 63 Void Seeker ships had been completely destroyed, with no survivors and no wreckage large enough to salvage. The enemy command fleet that had murdered children and attacked medical ships no longer existed. Admiral Chen opened a communication channel to the surviving Council forces, wherever they might be hiding. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force, speaking to all surviving Council military units. As of today, Earth has officially entered the war against the Void Seekers. We will accept no surrender from the enemy and offer no quarter. This threat to galactic civilization ends now." She paused, looking around her bridge at the crew members who had just participated in the most one-sided battle in recent galactic history. "To any Void Seeker forces receiving this transmission, understand this. You made a critical error when you chose to target human medical personnel and murder children under our protection. We are not the Council species you have been fighting. We do not use conventional tactics, we do not show mercy to child killers, and we do not stop until our enemies are completely destroyed." Admiral Chen's voice grew colder, more menacing. He wanted to send humanity a message. Message received. Now let us send one back. We are coming for you, and when we find you, there will be nothing left but empty space where your fleets used to be. The transmission ended, and Admiral Chen turned to Captain Stevens. "Set course for the next target system. We have a war to finish." As the human fleet prepared to jump back into hyperspace, Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they first learned about the Void Seekers. The real war was just beginning. The final battle began at dawn on a world that had no name, in a star system that appeared on no maps, around a massive space station that should not have existed. Deep in the void between spiral arms, the Void Seekers had built their ultimate stronghold, a biomechanical nightmare 300 kilometers across that served as both fortress and factory. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, studying the tactical displays that showed the enemy's last stand. For 3 months, the human fleet had carved a path of destruction through Void Seeker territory, eliminating their forces with ruthless efficiency. This station was their final refuge, defended by every ship they had left. "Enemy force composition?" Admiral Chen asked. Captain Stevens consulted his tactical display. Long-range sensors detect approximately 400 ships of various classes. The station itself appears to be heavily armed, with defensive capabilities equivalent to another 200 vessels. Admiral Chen nodded. It was exactly what their intelligence had predicted. The Void Seekers had gathered every surviving ship, every desperate crew, every last weapon they possessed to defend their final bastion. They were making their last stand here in the darkness between stars, where no help could reach them and no witnesses could observe their final defeat. "What about the station structure?" she asked. Dr. Harper, who had been assigned to the flagship as the fleet's xenobiology expert, activated a detailed scan of the enemy installation. "It is unlike anything we have encountered before. The outer shell appears to be living metal, constantly growing and adapting. The interior contains massive biomechanical systems that we believe are used for ship construction and technological integration. In other words, this is where they built their fleet and developed their adaptive capabilities." "Exactly. If we destroy this station, we eliminate not just their current forces but their ability to rebuild." Admiral Chen studied the tactical situation. The human fleet had grown since the war began, as more ships completed construction and joined the campaign. They now commanded 147 vessels, including 18 of the massive Retribution-class dreadnoughts. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, and every ship was crewed by volunteers who understood exactly what they were fighting for. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres at the communication station, "we are receiving a transmission from the surviving Council forces. High Admiral Korath of the Valorian Empire is requesting permission to join the attack." Admiral Chen raised an eyebrow. The Valorians had been reduced to fewer than 20 ships, scattered remnants of their once proud fleet. They had watched from a safe distance as the human ships systematically eliminated Void Seeker forces across the galaxy, too proud to ask for help but too practical to interfere. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Valorian heavy cruiser. High Admiral Korath looked older than when Admiral Chen had first met him. His golden skin scarred from recent battles, and his forearms bearing the marks of hand-to-hand combat. "Admiral Chen," he began without preamble, My remaining ships request permission to participate in this final battle. We know our forces are small compared to yours, but we wish to be present when this threat is finally eliminated." Admiral Chen considered the request. The Valorian ships would add little to the human fleet's combat capability, but their presence would have symbolic value. This was not just humanity's war, even if humans were the only ones capable of winning it. "Permission granted, High Admiral, but understand that you will follow human tactical doctrine and withdraw if ordered. This is our operation." "Understood and agreed. The Valorian Empire thanks you for this opportunity to help finish what we could not." The transmission ended, and Admiral Chen turned her attention back to the tactical display. More ships were arriving as other Council survivors requested permission to join the attack. A handful of Zenth vessels, their telepathic crews struggling to function without their hive mind connections. 3 ancient Kree ships crewed by the last military survivors of their species. Even some civilian vessels that had been converted into makeshift warships. In total, the Allied forces numbered perhaps 50 ships. They would be spectators more than participants, but Admiral Chen understood the psychological importance of their presence. When this war ended, the galaxy would remember that not just humans had stood against the darkness. "Admiral," Captain Stevens reported, "all human ships report ready for combat. Quantum destabilization cannons are charged, gravitational manipulators are online, and nanomachine swarms are loaded and ready for deployment." "Signal the fleet," Admiral Chen ordered. "Begin final approach. All ships maintain formation until we reach optimal firing range." The human fleet moved forward like a spearhead of death, their angular ships bristling with weapons that had redefined the nature of galactic warfare. Behind them came the Allied vessels, determined to witness the end of an enemy that had haunted the galaxy for a millennium. As they approached the enemy station, space around them began to fill with defensive fire. The Void Seekers had learned from their previous encounters with human forces, and they had adapted their tactics accordingly. But adaptation could only go so far when faced with weapons designed to operate outside the normal rules of physics. "Enemy fire is intensifying," reported the tactical officer. "They are concentrating on our lead ships." "All vessels, defensive formation Omega," Admiral Chen ordered. "Let them show us everything they have learned." The first wave of enemy fire struck the human ships like a cosmic storm. Energy beams that could vaporize mountains, kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed, and exotic weapons that twisted space-time itself. The Council species would have been annihilated by such firepower, their ships scattered like leaves in a hurricane. But human ships had not been built to fight other civilized species. They had been designed specifically to survive everything the Void Seekers could throw at them. Advanced shield systems absorbed energies that should have been impossible to contain, while armor plating incorporated materials that existed only in theoretical physics textbooks. "Damage report," Admiral Chen called out as the barrage continued. "Minor structural damage to 3 ships. No casualties," Captain Stevens replied. "All primary systems remain operational across the fleet." Admiral Chen allowed herself a small smile. The enemy was using everything they had, and it was not enough. Human engineering, driven by the knowledge that this moment would eventually come, had proven superior to 1,000 years of Void Seeker adaptation. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Commence primary bombardment." The human response was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. 18 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, their quantum destabilization cannon sending beams of pure annihilation across the void. Where the beams struck enemy ships, matter simply ceased to exist, leaving perfectly spherical holes in hulls that had been designed to adapt to any weapon. The gravitational manipulators activated next, creating spatial distortions that grabbed enemy vessels and crushed them like toys in the hands of an angry god. Ships that had survived the fire of a dozen species were compressed into points of ultra-dense matter, their crews and equipment reduced to exotic particles that quickly decayed into nothingness. The nanomachine swarms spread out like clouds of metallic death, seeking enemy hulls to dissolve and consume. These microscopic hunters had been programmed with detailed knowledge of Void Seeker biomechanical technology, and they went about their work with terrifying efficiency. Enemy ships simply began to come apart as their own integrated systems turned against them. But it was the viral programs that proved most devastating. Human computer specialists had spent months analyzing captured Void Seeker technology. learning how their biomechanical networks functioned. The viruses they had created were designed to be irresistible to the enemy's adaptive systems, appearing to be valuable technological upgrades right up until the moment they began destroying everything they touched. Within minutes, half the enemy fleet was gone. Not just destroyed, but eliminated so completely that no trace remained. The massive space station began to shudder as its defensive systems failed one by one. Its living metal hull unable to adapt fast enough to counter the multiple forms of attack it was facing. "Admiral," Dr. Harper called out with excitement in her voice. "The station's biomechanical matrix is collapsing. Their adaptive systems are being overwhelmed by the viral programs." On the main screen, they could see the enemy stronghold beginning to come apart. Sections of the living hull were dissolving, while other areas were being consumed by nanomachine swarms. The biomechanical systems that had been the source of Void Seeker power for a millennium were turning against themselves, infected by programs they could not identify or counter. The remaining enemy ships tried desperately to defend their last fortress, but they were facing weapons they had no defense against. Human technology, developed in secret and designed specifically to exploit every known weakness in Void Seeker systems, was proving irresistible. "Enemy fleet strength down to 100 ships and falling," reported the tactical officer. "The station's main power core is showing signs of instability." Admiral Chen watched the destruction with professional satisfaction. This was not just a military victory. It was the systematic elimination of a threat that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. When this battle ended, the Void Seekers would be nothing more than a historical footnote. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Torres called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the enemy station. It appears to be some kind of surrender offer." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Denied. We do not accept surrender from child killers." "Continue firing." The bombardment continued with methodical precision. Human ships worked their way through the remaining enemy vessels like surgeons removing a cancer. Each shot carefully aimed to ensure complete destruction. There would be no survivors, no prisoners, no possibility of the enemy rebuilding their forces. The massive space station was coming apart more rapidly now, its biomechanical systems unable to maintain structural integrity as the viral program spread through its networks. Sections the size of cities were breaking away and dissolving into component atoms, while the central core pulsed with unstable energy patterns. "Core breach imminent," Dr. Harper reported. "The station's power systems are cascading toward total failure." "All ships withdraw to safe distance," Admiral Chen ordered. "Prepare for secondary explosions." The human fleet pulled back to observe the final moments of their enemy's last stronghold. The space station, which had taken decades to grow and had been the source of countless nightmares across the galaxy, was now nothing more than a dying organism writhing in the void. The end came suddenly. The station's biomechanical core reached critical instability and collapsed in on itself, creating a brief but brilliant light that could be seen across several star systems. When the light faded, there was nothing left but empty space and the satisfied crews of human warships. "Scan for survivors," Admiral Chen ordered, though she already knew what the results would be. "Negative contacts," reported the tactical officer. "All enemy vessels and installations have been completely destroyed. No life signs detected anywhere in the system." Admiral Chen activated the fleet communication system and addressed not just her own ships, but the Allied vessels that had witnessed the final battle. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The Void Seeker threat has been eliminated. After 1,000 years of terror, their species no longer exists. The galaxy is safe." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human crews cheered on their bridges, while the Allied vessels sent messages of gratitude and amazement. The Valorian High Admiral's voice came over the communication system, filled with emotion that his translator could barely convey. "Admiral Chen, on behalf of all surviving Council species, I thank you. What you have accomplished here today will be remembered for as long as civilization exists in this galaxy." But Admiral Chen was not finished. She opened a general broadcast that would be received by every inhabited world within 100 light years. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force, broadcasting on all frequencies to all surviving civilizations. The war against the Void Seekers is over. Their fleets have been destroyed, their bases eliminated, and their species rendered extinct. The threat that has haunted this galaxy for a millennium no longer exists." She paused, looking around her bridge at the crew members who had helped make this moment possible. To the survivors of the Council species, know that Earth stands ready to assist in rebuilding what was lost. We offer medical aid, technological assistance, and safe haven for any who need it. The galaxy has been through a dark time, but the dawn has finally come. The transmission ended and Admiral Chen turned to Captain Stevens. Signal the fleet. We are going home. As the human ships prepared for the jump back to friendly space, Admiral Chen reflected on what they had accomplished. In 4 months of active warfare, humanity had eliminated an enemy that had defeated dozens of civilizations over the course of centuries. They had done it not through superior numbers or ancient wisdom, but through careful preparation and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect innocent life. The journey home took several days, during which reports began arriving from across the galaxy. The news of the Void Seeker's destruction had spread faster than the human fleet could travel, carried by quantum communication networks that spanned the civilized worlds. The reaction was universal celebration mixed with awe and, in some cases, fear. Humanity had demonstrated military capabilities that far exceeded anything the galaxy had previously seen. The weapons they had used were beyond the technology of even the most advanced Council species, and the efficiency with which they had eliminated their enemies was both impressive and terrifying. When the Retribution finally reached Earth orbit, Admiral Chen was surprised to find representatives from dozens of worlds waiting to greet them. The orbital stations around Earth were crowded with diplomatic vessels, refugee ships, and delegations from species that wanted to personally thank the humans who had saved their civilizations. President Martinez was waiting in the docking bay when Admiral Chen's shuttle arrived. The two women embraced briefly before the president led her to a private briefing room. "Sarah, what you and your people have accomplished is nothing short of miraculous," President Martinez said. "The entire galaxy is talking about humanity's victory, but I need to know, what are the long-term implications of what we have done?" Admiral Chen had been thinking about that question during the entire trip home. "Madam President, we have fundamentally changed the balance of power in this galaxy. Every species now knows that humans possess weapons and tactics that can eliminate threats they thought were invincible. That knowledge will affect every diplomatic and military decision for generations to come. And how do you think they will react to that knowledge? Some will be grateful, others will be fearful. A few might even be resentful that we waited so long to act. But all of them will respect our capabilities and think very carefully before making us their enemy." President Martinez nodded. "The diplomatic implications are complex but manageable. What concerns me more are the moral implications. We have committed genocide, Sarah. An entire species no longer exists because of our actions." Admiral Chen met the president's gaze steadily. A species that murdered children and targeted medical ships. A species that had spent 1,000 years exterminating every form of life it encountered. The Void Seekers made their choice when they decided that organic life had no right to exist. We simply enforced the consequences of that choice. And you feel no regret about that? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking about Captain Rodriguez and her crew, about the 15,000 civilians who had died in the Kepler 186 system, about all the worlds that had burned before humanity finally acted. "I regret that it took so long," she said finally. "I regret that we waited until they murdered our people before we acted. If we had intervened earlier, millions of lives might have been saved." The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from post-war reconstruction efforts to the future of Earth's military capabilities. When it ended, Admiral Chen made her way to the observation deck that overlooked Earth's primary orbital shipyard. The shipyard was busy with new construction, but these were not warships. Instead, human engineers were building medical vessels, research ships, and transport vessels designed to help rebuild the civilizations that had been damaged by the war. It was a hopeful sight, a sign that humanity's response to victory was not to build more weapons but to build tools for peace. "Admiral Chen?" She turned to see Dr. Harper approaching, carrying a data tablet and wearing an expression of scientific curiosity mixed with concern. "Doctor, what can I do for you?" "I have been analyzing the final battle data, and I have discovered something interesting. The Void Seekers were not just a military threat, they were also conducting research into something called dimensional manipulation technology." Admiral Chen frowned. "What kind of research?" "Based on the fragments of data we recovered from their station, They were trying to develop the ability to travel between parallel universes. If they had succeeded, they could have brought reinforcements from other dimensions, or escaped to continue their genocide in alternate realities. The implications were staggering. If the Void Seekers had completed their research, the threat they represented would have extended beyond just their own universe. They could have become a multi-dimensional plague, spreading their destruction across infinite realities. How close were they to success? Admiral Chen asked. Unknown, but their research notes suggest they were making significant progress. Admiral, we may have eliminated this threat just in time. If we had waited much longer, the war might have become unwinnable. Admiral Chen stared out at the stars, thinking about all the decisions that had led to this moment. Humanity's refusal to join the war early, their secret military preparations, their willingness to use weapons that other species considered too dangerous to develop. Every choice had been criticized at the time, but in the end they had proven correct. A week later, Admiral Chen stood before a joint session of the reformed Galactic Council. The chamber was smaller than before, with many empty seats representing species that no longer existed. But there were also new faces, representatives of worlds that had been liberated from Void Seeker control, and were now free to participate in galactic civilization. Honored delegates, she began. Humanity stands ready to assist in rebuilding what was lost and protecting what remains. But we must also discuss the future, and how we can ensure that such a threat never arises again. The Valorian representative, now bearing the title of High Admiral since their previous leader had died in the war, leaned forward. Admiral Chen, your species has demonstrated capabilities that none of us fully understand. What assurances can you give that these weapons will not be used against us? It was the question Admiral Chen had been expecting. Earth's demonstration of overwhelming military superiority had saved the galaxy, but it had also made other species nervous about humanity's intentions. Hi, Admiral. I can offer you the same assurance we have always provided. Earth will defend itself and its allies, but we will not use our capabilities for conquest or oppression. We prefer to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm. But we will never again stand by while innocent beings are murdered by those who believe might makes right. The Zenth representative, one of the few individuals of their species who had learned to function without hive mind connections, pulsed with nervous energy. What about your weapons technology? Will you share it with the Council for defensive purposes? Admiral Chen shook her head. Some knowledge is too dangerous to spread widely. The weapons we used against the Void Seekers were designed for a specific enemy and a specific threat. In the wrong hands, they could cause more harm than good, but Earth will always stand ready to defend Council space against any similar threat. The ancient Kree representative, one of only a handful of survivors from their species, spoke in his creaking voice. Admiral Chen, your species has done something unprecedented in galactic history. You have eliminated a threat that has existed for a millennium, but you have also demonstrated that the balance of power has permanently shifted. How do we move forward from this point? Admiral Chen looked around the chamber at the faces of beings whose civilizations had been saved by human intervention. Some showed gratitude, others showed fear, and a few showed the kind of calculating intelligence that suggested they were already thinking about how to use or counter humanity's capabilities. We move forward together, she said simply. The galaxy has been given a second chance, and it is up to all of us to make the most of it. Earth offers friendship to all who desire peace, protection to all who face threats they cannot handle alone, and cooperation in building a future where no species needs to fear extinction at the hands of those who would destroy rather than create. The session continued for several hours, covering everything from trade agreements to mutual defense treaties. When it ended, Admiral Chen was approached by High Admiral Korath, who had been waiting patiently for a private conversation. Admiral Chen, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. When your species first refused to join our alliance, I called you cowards and isolationists. I was wrong. You were desperate and afraid for your people, Admiral Chen replied. Under those circumstances, anyone might have said similar things. Perhaps. But I want you to know that the Valorian Empire will never forget what humanity has done. You saved not just our species, but all organic life in this galaxy. That debt can never be repaid. Admiral Chen smiled. High Admiral, there is no debt. We did what needed to be done, nothing more and nothing less. Now we must all work together to ensure that such a threat never arises again. As Admiral Chen made her way back to the shuttle that would take her home to Earth, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had entered the galactic community as the newest and most primitive member, looked down upon by species with thousands of years of spacefaring experience. But when the greatest test came, it was humanity that had the wisdom to prepare properly and the courage to do what was necessary. They had not started the war, but they had certainly finished it. The shuttle cleared the station's docking bay and began its journey toward Earth. Through the viewport, Admiral Chen could see the stars that had once seemed so full of threats and enemies. Now they looked different, full of possibilities and opportunities for the species that had survived to create something better. The war was over, the enemy was gone, and the galaxy was safe. It was time to build a better future for everyone who called the stars their home. But Admiral Chen also knew that vigilance would always be necessary. The universe was vast and full of unknown dangers. Humanity would continue to prepare, to watch, and to stand ready to defend civilization against whatever threats might emerge. After all, as she had told the galaxy in her final broadcast, Earth doesn't start wars, but we sure as hell finish them.
The war was lost. Admiral Kextar knew it as he watched another coalition fleet burn in the darkness of space. Red emergency lights flashed across the bridge of his command ship while damaged vessels limped away from the battle zone. The Vorthik had won again. How many ships did we lose? Kextar asked his aide, a young officer whose blue skin had turned pale with fear. 47 ships destroyed, sir. 23 more too damaged to fight. The aide's voice shook as he read the numbers. The Vorthik lost only 3 ships. Kextar closed his 4 eyes and let out a long breath. In 3 months, the enemy had taken 12 star systems. Their biomechanical ships were like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They could heal themselves during battle and grow stronger. As they consumed destroyed coalition vessels, traditional weapons barely scratched their living hulls. "Sir, we have a message from the High Council," another officer called out. "They want to speak with you right away." The hologram of Council. Leader Vexana appeared above the bridge. Her ancient face looked tired and desperate. "Admiral, we are running out of options. The Vorthik fleet is heading toward the core worlds. If they take those systems, the war is over." "What do you want me to do?" Kextar asked. "We have tried everything. Our best weapons cannot stop them." "There is one more option," Vexana said quietly. "Something we found in the Outer Rim. A ship from the old archives. It belonged to a species called humans." Kextar had heard of humans before. They were a small species that had disappeared from the galaxy long ago. Most people thought they were extinct. "What makes you think an old human ship can help us?" "Because humans were different from us," Vexana explained. "The archives say they fought wars in ways we never imagined. Wars where entire species were wiped out completely. Maybe that is what we need now." The Admiral felt a chill run through his body. The Coalition had always fought with honor and rules. They tried to avoid killing civilians and protected prisoners of war. But the Vorthik showed no such mercy. They consumed everything in their path. "Where is this ship?" he asked. "Drifting in the Void Sector. A salvage team found it last week. The ship is called the USS Black Star. It has been floating in space for over 200 years. Kextar gave the order and his fleet changed course. 3 days later, they arrived at the coordinates. The human ship hung in the darkness like a sleeping giant. It was massive, bigger than most Coalition warships, but built in a way that looked rough and brutal. Where Coalition ships were smooth and elegant, this vessel was covered in thick armor. "Plates and weapon mounts. Scan the ship," Kextar ordered. "Tell me what you find." The science officer worked at his station for several minutes. "Sir, the ship appears to be intact. I am reading life signs inside. Many life signs." "Life signs? After 200 years?" "Yes, sir. It looks like the humans are in some kind of deep sleep. The ship's systems are running on minimum power, but everything is still working." Kextar stared at the ancient vessel. Send a boarding team. I want to know what we are dealing with. Commander Zaldek led the boarding party through the airlock. The human ship was dark inside, except for dim blue lights that ran along the walls. The air was cold and smelled like metal and something else they could not identify. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. The technology is primitive, one of the team members said as they walked, but it looks solid, built to last. They found the first chamber filled with rows of sleeping pods. Through the clear covers, they could see the humans inside. They looked peaceful, as if they were just taking a nap. But there was something about their faces that made Zolduk nervous. Even in sleep, they looked hard and dangerous. "How many are there?" he asked. "I count over 800 pods in this section alone," his scanner operator replied. "And there are more sections like this one." They made their way to what looked like the command center. It was different from coalition bridges. Everything was built for function, not beauty. The chairs were made for beings who expected to fight hard battles. Weapon controls were everywhere. "Commander, I found something," one of his team called out. "It looks like a computer terminal that is still active." Zolduk walked over to the glowing screen. The writing was in human language, but his translator could read some of it. USS Blackstar, Colonial Defense Force, mission: protect human colonies from hostile forces. Status: Deep Space Patrol. "Sir, we should wake them up," another team member suggested. "Maybe they can help us fight the Vorthek." Zoluk thought about it. The coalition was desperate. They had tried everything else and failed. Maybe it was time to try something different, something dangerous. "Send word to Admiral Kekstar," he said. "Tell him we found them. 847 humans sleeping and waiting. If we wake them up, there is no going back." As they waited for orders, Zolduk looked around the human ship one more time. These beings had built their vessel for war, not exploration or trade. Every surface, every design choice, spoke of a species that knew how to fight and was not afraid to do what was necessary to win. The question was, would that be enough to stop the Vorthek? And if it was, what would the galaxy look like when the humans were done? The first thing Captain Sarah Chun noticed when she woke up was the smell. It was wrong. Her ship always smelled like recycled air and metal polish, but this was different. There were alien scents mixed in, strange and unsettling. Her eyes opened slowly as the cryopod hissed and released her. The medical bay was darker than it should be, and she could hear voices speaking in languages she did not recognize. Her hand moved automatically to where her sidearm should be, but it was not there. "Captain Chun, please remain calm," a voice said in accented English. "You are safe." Sarah sat up carefully, her muscles stiff from the long sleep. Standing near her pod was something that looked like a tall, thin person, but its skin was blue and it had 4 eyes. Next to it stood another creature that was shorter and covered in what looked like gray fur. "What the hell are you?" she asked, her voice rough from the cryo-sleep. "I am Admiral Kekstar of the Galactic Coalition," the blue alien said. "This is Dr. Milan. We found your ship drifting in space. You have been asleep for 212 years. Sarah stared at them. 200 years? That's impossible. We were only supposed to be out for 6 months. We were patrolling the outer colonies, looking for the rebels who attacked New Texas." The Admiral and Doctor looked at each other sadly. "Captain, I am afraid we have difficult news to share with you. Your species ... humans. They are no longer what they once were." Sarah got out of the pod, her legs shaky but getting stronger. "What do you mean? Where are the colonies? Where is Earth?" "Earth fell to civil wars about 50 years after your ship disappeared," Admiral Kekstar explained. "The human colonies fought each other until most were destroyed. The survivors scattered across the galaxy. Most humans today live as traders or workers on alien worlds. They are considered a minor species." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Minor species? We built the largest fleet in known space. We colonized 40 star systems. How can we be minor? Dr. Milne stepped forward. The galaxy has changed, Captain. There are hundreds of species now working together in the coalition. Technology has advanced far beyond what your people achieved. Most races have learned to live in peace and cooperation. Most races? Sarah asked, hearing something in the doctor's voice. That is why we woke you, Admiral Kekstar said. We face an enemy called the Vorthic hegemony. They are unlike anything we have ever seen. They do not want to talk or make deals. They only want to consume and destroy. In 3 months, they have taken 12 of our star systems. Sarah walked to a nearby window and looked out at the alien ships surrounding her vessel. They were sleek and beautiful, nothing like the brutal warships she was used to. What does this have to do with me and my crew? Your ship is different, the Admiral said. It was built for war in ways we do not understand. The weapons, the armor, even the way your crew is organized. Everything about it is designed for total conflict. Of course it is, Sarah said. We were fighting for our survival. The rebel colonies had weapons that could crack planets. We had to be ready for anything. The aliens looked shocked. Crack planets? Dr. Milne whispered. Standard siege tactics, Sarah said with a shrug. If you cannot take a world, you make it useless to the enemy. We developed kinetic bombardment systems that could shatter continents. Nuclear mines that could contaminate systems for centuries. Virus bombs that could wipe out all life on a planet. Admiral Kekstar stepped back. But the civilians ... What about them? Sarah asked. In war, everyone is a target. The rebels taught us that when they hit the civilian transports at Kepler Station, 2 million people died in 30 seconds. After that, we stopped playing nice. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Kekstar spoke again. This is exactly why we need you. The Vorthic do not follow the rules of war that we know. They eat entire populations. They turn captured ships into more of their own vessels. Our weapons barely hurt them because we designed them for civilized warfare. Sarah laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Civilized warfare. That is your problem right there. War is not civilized. War is about killing the other guy before he kills you. It is about making the enemy so afraid that they never want to fight you again. Will you help us? The Admiral asked. Sarah looked at the alien ships again. They were pretty and advanced, but they looked fragile. Like toys built by people who had never faced real danger. What happened to the rest of my crew? They are still in cryosleep. We wanted to speak with you first. Wake them all up, Sarah ordered. And I want to see everything you have on these. Vorthic, ship designs, battle reports, tactical analysis. Everything. You will help us then? Sarah turned to face the aliens. Admiral, you woke up 800 humans who have been trained to fight wars of extinction. We lost our home, our colonies, our entire civilization while we were sleeping. We have nothing left to lose, and nowhere else to go. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. But understand this. If we fight for you, we fight our way. No rules of engagement. No protection for enemy civilians. No mercy for anyone who threatens what we are protecting. If you cannot accept that, put us back to sleep and find another solution. Admiral Kekstar watched the human captain leave. She was smaller than most coalition officers, but there was something about her that made his skin crawl. It was like looking at a predator that had been sleeping for too long. Doctor, he said quietly, what have we done? Dr. Milne was reading from his medical scanner. The human's brain patterns are unlike anything I have seen. The neural pathways associated with violence and tactical thinking are far more developed than in any modern species. It is as if they evolved specifically for warfare. Can they defeat the Vorthic? I do not know, the doctor replied. But I am beginning to think the Vorthik might not be the most dangerous thing in this galaxy anymore. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the USS Blackstar and watched her crew work. It had been 3 days since they woke up, and her people were already making the alien observers nervous. The Coalition officers who stayed to watch kept whispering to each other whenever her crew laughed at something or made jokes about weapon modifications. "Captain, we have finished reviewing the Vorthik battle data," reported Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, her tactical officer. "These aliens fight like amateurs." "Show me," Sarah said. The main screen lit up with recordings from recent battles. Sarah watched Coalition ships firing energy beams at long range, while the Vorthak vessels slowly closed the distance. When the enemy got close enough, their biomechanical ships would latch onto Coalition vessels and begin consuming them. "They fight like it is a dance," Webb continued. "Long range, careful movements, trying not to damage civilian areas nearby. No wonder they are losing." Admiral Kekstar, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. "Captain, we follow the Galactic War conventions. We do not target civilian populations or use weapons of mass destruction." Sarah turned to look at him. "Admiral, show me where Vesha Prime is on the map." The star chart appeared on screen. Vesha Prime was a Coalition world currently under siege by a large Vorthak fleet. The planet held 8 billion people. "How long have they been under attack?" Sarah asked. 14 days, Kekstar replied. "We have sent 3 relief fleets, but the Vorthik ships are too strong. We estimate the planet will fall within a week." Sarah studied the tactical display. 47 Vorthik vessels surrounded the planet, while a small Coalition defense force tried to hold them off. It was a standard siege, exactly the kind of situation her crew had trained for during the colonial wars. "We are going to break that." "Siege," Sarah announced. "Captain, with respect, your ship is powerful, but it is only one vessel," Admiral Kekstar said. "The Vorthik have an entire fleet." "Admiral, you are about to learn why humans were feared before we disappeared," Sarah said. She turned to her crew. "All hands, prepare for combat jump. Target, Vesha Prime System. Time to arrival, 6 hours." The Coalition officers looked confused. "Captain, we need to plan this carefully. We should gather more ships, study their positions, coordinate with the defense fleet." Sarah ignored them. "Webb, what is our missile inventory?" "Full load, Captain. 200 nuclear torpedoes, 500 kinetic penetrators, and 50 planet crackers." Admiral Kekstar went pale. "Planet crackers? You cannot be serious." "Just insurance," Sarah said with a cold smile. "Helm, take us out. Jump coordinates locked in." The USS Blackstar disappeared from Coalition space in a flash of light. 6 hours later, it dropped out of hyperspace directly in the middle of the Vorthik siege fleet. The aliens were so surprised that for 10 seconds, nobody moved. "All weapons, open fire," Sarah ordered. What happened next would be talked about in the galaxy for years to come. The Blackstar did not engage in the careful long-range combat that everyone expected. Instead, it charged straight into the enemy. Formation like an angry beast. Nuclear torpedoes streaked out in all directions, detonating against Vorthik hulls with blinding flashes. The biomechanical ships, which had seemed unstoppable against energy weapons, began to burn and die under the raw destructive power of human atomics. Kinetic penetrators followed, massive tungsten rods moving at incredible speed that punched through alien armor like it was paper. "Captain, 3 enemy ships are trying to board us," Webb reported. "Let them come," Sarah said. "Deploy boarding countermeasures." The Vorthik had never faced human boarding defenses. Hidden weapon ports opened all over the Blackstar's hull and began firing. Not energy beams or stunning weapons, but solid metal bullets that tore through alien flesh and armor. Explosive charges went off in the airlocks, turning would-be boarders into floating debris. 6 enemy ships destroyed, Webb called out. 12 more heavily damaged. Good, now ram the flagship. Admiral Kekstar, who was watching from the bridge, could not believe what he was hearing. Ram them? That will destroy your ship too. No, it will not, Sarah said calmly. Webb, activate the reinforced bow section. Full power to forward shields. The USS Blackstar accelerated toward the largest Vorthik vessel, which was 3 times its size. The enemy ship tried to turn away, but it was too slow. The human warship struck it head-on with such force that the impact could be seen from the planet below. But the Blackstar did not stop there. It pushed through the wreckage of the enemy flagship and kept firing. Its weapons had been designed to work even while ramming, and they cut through the damaged Vorthik ship like a sword through flesh. Flagship destroyed, Webb reported. Enemy fleet is breaking formation. What followed was not a battle but a slaughter. The Vorthik ships, which had never faced such aggressive tactics, tried to retreat. But Sarah had positioned her ship to cut off their escape routes. One by one, the alien vessels were hunted down and destroyed. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the planet, the communications officer said. The defense fleet wants to know if we need assistance. Sarah looked at the tactical display. 47 enemy ships had been reduced to debris and floating bodies. The entire engagement had lasted less than 30 minutes. Tell them the siege is broken, she said. Also tell them to start scanning for survivors. Survivors? Admiral Kekstar asked. Vorthik survivors, Sarah explained. We need to make sure none of them escape to report what happened here. This only works if the enemy does not know what hit them. The Admiral stared at her. Captain, you just destroyed an entire fleet by yourself. How is that possible? Sarah walked to the viewport and looked out at the wreckage floating in space. Admiral, your people have forgotten something important. There is a difference between fighting a war and fighting to survive. We fought for survival for so long that we became very good at killing things. She turned back to face him. The Vorthik are used to fighting civilized species who follow rules and worry about honor. They have never faced a species that fights like we do, a species that treats every battle like it might be the last one. What happens now? Kekstar asked. Now we hunt, Sarah said. Every Vorthik ship, every base, every planet they control. We are going to show them what humans do to things that threaten our friends. Admiral Kekstar looked out at the destroyed fleet and felt a chill run through his body. He had wanted the humans to help win the war, but now he was beginning to wonder if they had just started something much worse. The news of what happened at Thesha Prime spread through the galaxy like wildfire. In less than a week, every species in Coalition space had heard about the human ship that destroyed an entire Vorthik fleet in 30 minutes, but Admiral Kekstar was getting reports that made no sense. Show me the data again, he told his intelligence officer. The hologram displayed a map of Vorthik territory. Red dots marked enemy positions, but many of them were blinking or had disappeared completely. Sir, in the past 2 weeks we have lost contact with 17 Vorthik outposts. When our scouts investigate, they find nothing. No ships, no debris, no distress signals, just empty space. What about our tracking of the Blackstar? That is the problem, sir. Our sensors show the ship attacking a base in the Rigel sector. But at the same time, other reports place it in the Vega system, 300 light-years away. Yesterday, it appeared to hit 5 different targets simultaneously. Kekstar studied the data with growing unease. That is impossible. Even with the fastest hyperdrives, no ship can be in 5 places at once. Unless there is more than one ship. The officer suggested. Before Kekstar could respond, an urgent message came through. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from Captain Chun. She wants to speak with the High Council immediately. The communication came through on a secured channel. Captain Chun appeared on the screen. but she looked different. Her uniform was cleaner, her equipment more advanced. Behind her, Kextar could see what looked like Vorthek technology mixed with human weapons. "Admiral, we need to talk," Chun said without greeting. "I am sending you coordinates. Bring the council leaders, but come alone. No escorts, no weapons." "Captain, where are you? Our sensors cannot locate your ship." "That is because we are not using the same ship anymore," Chun replied. "Just come to the coordinates. You will understand when you see what we have built." 2 days later, Kextar and 3 council members arrived at the location Chun had specified. It was an empty region of space between star systems, the kind of place ships avoided because there was nothing there. But as their vessel dropped out of hyperspace, they saw something that made them question their own eyes. Floating in the darkness was a massive structure that looked like a cross between a space station and a living organism. Parts of it were clearly human technology, but other sections pulsed with the biomechanical features of Vorthek ships. And docked around it were dozens of vessels that looked like smaller versions of the original Black Star. "What in the name of the ancestors is that?" whispered Council Leader Vexana. Their ship was guided to a docking bay by automated systems. When they stepped out, Captain Chun was waiting for them, along with several of her crew members. But they all looked different now. Their equipment was more advanced, and there was something in their eyes that had not been there before. "Welcome to our base of operations," Chun said. "We call it the Forge. Captain, what have you done?" Kextar asked. "We adapted," Chun replied. "The Vorthek ships we captured, we did not just destroy them. We studied them, took them apart, learned how they work. Their biotechnology is actually quite useful when you know how to control it." She led them through corridors that were unsettling to look at. The walls seemed to pulse with life, but they were covered with human control panels and weapon systems. The Vorthek grow their ships instead of building them. Once we figured out how to modify their genetic codes, we could make them grow the way we wanted. "You are using their own technology against them?" Vexana asked. "More than that," said Lieutenant Commander Webb, who joined the group. "We are improving it. Human weapon systems combined with Vorthek biotech. Ships that can heal themselves, but also carry nuclear warheads. Vessels that can reproduce like living things, but follow human tactical programming." They entered a large chamber where Kextar could see the production line. Vorthek biopods were being modified with human technology, growing into new ships that looked like deadly hybrids. Workers in protective suits moved between the growing vessels, installing weapon systems and control interfaces. "How many ships have you created?" Kextar asked. 47 so far," Chun replied. "Each one is commanded by a team of my people, and can operate independently. They are faster than the original Black Star, harder to detect, and much more deadly." "The attacks we have been hearing about," Vexana said slowly. "Your ships are hitting Vorthek positions all across their territory." "Correct," Chun said. "We are not just fighting them. We are hunting them. Every ship, every base, every world they control. We track them down and we eliminate them completely." Admiral Kextar felt sick. "Captain, you are talking about genocide." "No," Chun said firmly. "Genocide is what the Vorthek were doing to you. What we are doing is pest control." She led them to another chamber where captured Vorthek were being held in containment fields. The aliens looked terrified, pressing themselves against the barriers whenever humans walked by. "We have learned a lot from our prisoners," Chun continued. "The Vorthek are not as unified as they appeared. They have different castes, different loyalty structures. Once we understood that, it became much easier to turn them against each other." "Turn them against each other?" Webb asked. "Psychological warfare," Chun explained. "We release modified Vorthek ships back into their territory. Ships that look normal but carry human programming. They spread paranoia and distrust through their fleets. Now the Vorthik spend as much time fighting each other as they do running from us. One of the council members, an elderly being with tentacles instead of arms, spoke up. Captain Chun, what you are describing sounds more like torture than warfare. Chun turned to face him, and her expression was cold. Council member Trelake, in the past month, how many coalition worlds have the Vorthik attacked? None, Trelake admitted. How many coalition ships have they destroyed? None. How many coalition civilians have died in Vorthik raids? None. But ... Then, our methods are working, Chun interrupted. You hired us to solve a problem. We are solving it. Admiral Kekstar looked around the alien structure with growing horror. Captain, you have become something terrible. No, Admiral, Chun replied. We have become something necessary. The galaxy forgot that sometimes, to protect innocent life, you have to be willing to do horrible things. The Vorthik understood only strength and fear, so we gave them both. She walked to a large viewport that showed space around the forge. In 2 weeks there will be no more Vorthik fleets. In a month, there will be no more Vorthik worlds. In 6 months, the galaxy will be safe from them forever. And then what? Vexana asked. What happens to your war machine when there are no more enemies to fight? Captain Chun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we go home, Council Leader. Back to Earth to rebuild what we lost, and we take our new technology with us. As the coalition leaders returned to their ship, Admiral Kekstar could not shake the feeling that they had just witnessed the birth of something far more dangerous than the Vorthik had ever been. The humans had not just won the war. They had transformed into the perfect predators, and now they had the tools to grow stronger than anyone could imagine. The silence started slowly. At first, coalition intelligence officers thought their sensors were malfunctioning. Reports from the front lines stopped coming in. Scout ships sent to investigate Vorthik positions found empty space where enemy fleets should have been. Admiral Kekstar stood in the coalition command center, staring at a star map that made no sense. Every red dot that had marked a Vorthik presence was now gray, indicating no detected activity. When was the last confirmed Vorthik sighting? He asked his intelligence chief. 47 days ago, sir. A single ship fleeing through the outer rim. It disappeared into deep space and has not been seen since. What about their home worlds, the planets they conquered? Empty, sir. Our long-range scans show the planets are still there, but there are no energy signatures, no communications, no movement of any kind. Kekstar felt a chill run down his spine. Send a fleet to investigate the Vorthak home system. I want to know what happened there. 3 days later, the investigation fleet returned with data that left the entire coalition leadership speechless. The Vorthak home system contained 5 planets that had once held billions of the biomechanical aliens. Now the worlds were completely lifeless. Not destroyed, not bombed into rubble, but simply empty, as if every living thing had just vanished. There are no bodies, the fleet commander reported. No debris, no signs of battle. The cities are intact, the infrastructure is undamaged, but there is nothing alive. Not even bacteria. Council leader Vexana reviewed the reports with growing unease. How do you make an entire species disappear without leaving any trace? You would have to ask Captain Chun, Admiral Kekstar replied. But I am not sure I want to know the answer. As if summoned by his words, a communication request came through the main console. The screen flickered to life, showing Captain Chun on the bridge of what looked like the original USS Blackstar. But Kekstar could see that even this ship had been modified with Vorthik technology. Admiral Council Leader, Chun said with a polite nod, I wanted to inform you that our mission is complete. Complete? Vexana asked. Captain, what exactly have you done? We eliminated the threat as requested, Chun replied calmly. The Vorthok hegemony no longer exists. But where are they? Kekstar demanded. We have searched their territories and found nothing. No bodies, no wreckage, nothing. Chun's expression remained neutral. What did you expect to find, Admiral? Evidence. Proof of what happened to them. Why would you need proof of something that never existed? Chun asked. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Vexana leaned forward. Captain, what do you mean, never existed? I mean exactly that, Chun said. Check your historical databases, search your archives. Look for any reference to something called the Vorthok hegemony. With growing dread, Admiral Kekstar accessed the Coalition's central database. He searched for Vorthok, for the war records, for the battle reports he had filed himself. The computer returned the same message every time. No results found. This is impossible, he whispered. The war lasted months. Thousands of my people died fighting them. Did they? Chun asked. Can you prove that? Do you have any evidence that this war ever happened? Kekstar frantically searched through his personal files, his communication logs, his official reports. Everything related to the Vorthok had simply vanished. Even his own memories were starting to feel uncertain, like trying to remember a half-forgotten dream. What have you done? Vexana asked, her voice barely a whisper. We solved your problem. Chun said, you wanted the threat eliminated completely. So we eliminated it. Not just the ships, not just the soldiers, but the very idea of them. Every record, every mention, every trace of their existence has been removed from history. That is impossible, Kekstar said. You cannot erase an entire species from history. Can't. We? Chun asked. We captured their biotechnology, remember? Including their data storage systems and communication networks. Every bit of information they ever recorded. Every memory they ever shared through their collective consciousness. We didn't just destroy their bodies, Admiral. We destroyed their legacy. The implications hit Kekstar like a physical blow. You wiped them from the historical record. Made it so they never existed. More than that, Chun continued. We used their own biotechnology to create a selective virus. Something that targets the specific neural pathways associated with memories of them. Anyone who had direct contact with the Vorthok will find those memories fading over the next few weeks. Including us, Vexana realized. Including you, Chun confirmed. In a month, you will remember that there was some kind of threat that required our assistance, but you will not remember what that threat was. The galaxy will return to normal, and no one will ever know that the Vorthok existed. Admiral Kekstar felt his legs go weak. Captain, that is horrifying. You have committed the ultimate genocide. You have erased an entire species not just from existence, but from memory. We have ensured that this threat can never return, Chun said. Firmly. Not their children, not their descendants, not even their ideas. They are gone in every way that matters. And now? Vexana asked, what happens to you and your fleet? Now we go home, Chun said. Back to Earth, to rebuild what we lost while we were sleeping. The galaxy is safe now. You will never need to fear the Vorthok again, because as far as reality is concerned, they never existed. The communication ended, leaving the coalition leaders staring at a blank screen. Within hours, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships were leaving their positions and heading toward the outer rim, toward the coordinates of a small forgotten world called Earth. Admiral, his aide said quietly, I have been reviewing our recent mission reports. There are references to some kind of military operation, but I cannot find any details about what we were fighting. Kekstar tried to remember, but the memories were already becoming fuzzy. There had been an enemy, he was sure of that. Something dangerous that had threatened the coalition. But what had it been? The harder he tried to remember, the more the details slipped away. It does not matter, he said finally. Whatever it was, it is over now. As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them their hybrid ships and terrible weapons, the galaxy settled back into peace. The coalition worlds resumed their normal activities, their citizens going about their daily lives without fear. But in the deep corners of space, where the last traces of Vorthak presence had once existed, there was only empty darkness. And in the archives of a dozen species, there were gaps in the historical record that no one could explain. Missing entries, deleted files, blank spaces where something important had once been recorded. That's something that no one could remember, because it had never happened at all. The humans had not just won the war. They had erased it from existence, taking with them the terrible knowledge of what they were capable of doing to protect the things they cared about. And as their ships traveled toward home, the galaxy remained peaceful and ignorant of the monsters that had briefly walked among them, because monsters, after all, exist only in the memories of those who survive to tell the tale. And in this case, there was no tale to tell.